Hey, what is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. We've talked a lot about Luke Fickell for obvious reasons, but what we really haven't talked about is some of the coaches coming with them. We're going to get into that in today's show. How is he building out his staff? Is it a better version of maybe what we've had recently? And what are the coaches coming in bringing from a coaching standpoint and a recruiting standpoint? We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers plus more. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to Locked On Badgers. I am your host, Ryan Herrings. I really do appreciate everybody tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on the podcast, whatever it is, thank you so much for tuning in and making this one of your first stops. It really does mean a lot to me. And let's get into it, right? So we've talked a lot about Luke Fickell for obvious reasons. We've talked a lot about Chris McIntosh for obvious reasons, right? We've talked a lot about Jim Leonhard for obvious reasons. But what we really haven't spent much time on and what is incredibly important to the success of this program is how is Luke Fickell building out his staff, right? A head coach really is only as good as his staff around him. It's only as good as the recruiting staff he builds. And it's going to be fascinating this offseason, really. One of the most fascinating parts of this is to see how Luke Fickell, Coach Fickell builds this staff out. How many guys does he take from Cincinnati? How many places does he go and poach an individual person that maybe he's had an eye on for a while? How many current Wisconsin coaches does he keep, if any? Right? Who's going to be the offensive coordinator? This team has been so offensively deprived for years. Who is he bringing in to resuscitate that offense? So I'm just so fascinated to see how he builds this out. And we have some names. We have some names that, listen, nothing's been officially announced, but there's three names that we are almost certain that are coming. We're certain enough that we can talk about them. And it's Mike Tressell, defensive coordinator, linebacker coach, Colin Hitschler, who is a co-defensive coordinator and the safeties coach, and Mike Brown is the receivers coach and the passing game coordinator as well. So we're going to talk about those three. Those three have basically been verified as coming with Luke Fickell to Madison. They were all Cincinnati coaches. And let's start with the big name there, Mike Tressell. So this one's interesting to me for a couple reasons. Let's get some Tressell background first. So Tressell is a guy who originally from Philly, so some recruiting ties in there. Cut his teeth at Michigan State. You know those great Michigan State teams under D'Antoni, and you had Pat Narduzzi, the defensive coordinator. Those really good defensive teams at Michigan State that the Badgers were really clashing with in the Russell Wilson era. That's where Tressell cut his teeth, and he's played in a variety of different defenses. He's been involved in a 4-4. He's been involved in a 3-3-5, taking over at Cincinnati. He's played a 3-4, and he's talked about just the ability to be versatile. So him coming over, listen, one of the things that people have talked about a lot, and it's been overblown, by the way, when you see this on Twitter and, how is Luke Fickell going to bring his 3-3-5 defense to Madison? That's what he ran in Cincinnati. Luke Fickell and that Bearcats team ran a bunch of different defenses. Like he's not coming here and only going to run the 3-3-5. And the fact that Tressell's coming over, I think validates that because Tressell's had experience in a lot of different defenses. So, he's coming over and this is a really established coach. He's coming off the AFCA, which is the American Football Coaches Association Assistant Coach of the Year Award. So you're bringing in a coordinator who just won the Assistant Coach of the Year. He has a lot of recruiting ties to Michigan, to Ohio. Again, having been in Michigan State, like he recruits that state well. And at Cincinnati, he's recruited Ohio well. So if you think back to what Luke Fickell said about kind of drawing that 300-mile circle, well, that circle is going to include Michigan. I mean, you could probably stretch it to include Ohio. This is a guy that can recruit in both those places. It's a guy who just won an Assistant Coach of the Year award. It's a guy who's familiar with the Big Ten. It's a guy who's been in a lot of different defenses and has seen successful defenses. Last year, his defense was the 22nd in the country in scoring, 18th in yards per carry rush defense, and 12th in passing efficiency defense. So a top 20 defense really against the run and the pass. He's bringing a successful track record, the ability to recruit the Midwest, and national accolades. So I like it. I think it's a very strong move. I'm excited to see what he's going to do with this defense. We're going to talk in the next couple segments what some of these coaches coming over means for the current Badger staff. So that's going to come up next. So let's move off of Tressell, come to Colin Hitschler. Hitchler's coming over. He is the co-defensive coordinator, safeties coach as well, originally from Philly. So another guy with kind of somewhat Midwestern roots. I mean, Philly's not exactly Midwest, but, somebody who can hopefully get into those areas. A lot of talent in Pennsylvania. He can get into those areas, recruit there. considered a very good recruiter, by the way. Did a stint with the Kansas City Chiefs as a player personnel assistant. And then he's been with Cincinnati for a while. He started as a defensive assistant, and then kind of moved up the ranks. He was a safeties coach, co-defensive coordinator. And this is a guy that, again, we talked about Luke Fickell winning basically assistant coach of the year. This is another coach here coming over that has a lot of national credit given to him. So 0-3, which is a recruiting website, a relatively newer one that's come on the scene challenging 247 and Rivals. 0-3 listed both Hitschler and Mike Brown, who we're going to talk about next, as some of the assistants' rising stars that you have to watch. And they named both of these coaches to that list. So you have some guys coming over that have some pedigree and some swag to them. And Hitschler is one of those guys. So Mike Brown also coming over. He's the receivers coach. Played 4 years in the NFL from Virginia originally. He's been with Cincinnati since 2019, receivers coach. And then just last year, he added the passing game coordinator title. Another guy, much like Hitschler, that 0-3 named as one of the rising star assistants that you need to know in 2022. So you have these three guys. One of them just won the Coach of the Year award, the Assistant Coach of the Year award, and the other two were named to the rising star assistants that you need to know. All three of them considered really good recruiters, especially Brown, especially Hitschler. Brown, the receivers coach specifically, spent 4 years in the NFL. I really like that as a recruiting chip, right? That's something Paul Chris, by the way, was really, really keen on, finding guys who either coached in the NFL or played in the NFL. I think that plays up on the recruiting field, right? You can go into somebody's locker room, say, I played at the highest level, and I can help you get there because I know what it's like to get there. I've been there. So you have these three coaches have all been essentially linked. You have a receivers coach coming over, so check that box. You have a safeties co-defensive coordinator coming over, so there's your safeties coach. And then you have a linebackers defensive coordinator coach coming over. It's going to be interesting, right? Because you can maneuver your staff in certain ways. You can have two defensive backs coach. You can have a cornerback coach and a safeties coach, or you could just have a defensive backs coach. You could have one linebackers coach, or like you've seen Wisconsin do, you can have an outside linebackers coach and an inside linebackers coach. So again, I'm going to talk a little bit about what these moves kind of mean, what I think they mean for the current Badger staff that's in place, where else they may need to hire Luke Fickell. But on the whole, all three of these seem like really solid additions. Seem like they have a good recruiting footprint for all of them: Midwest, Virginia, Philadelphia, and it's all coaches that have gotten national credit as either rising stars or, again, Tressell just won the Assistant Coach of the Year, right, from the AFCA, which is the American Football Coaches Association. Like that's the guy you're bringing in. That's a lot of firepower, and it's a big deal. And you can sell that on the recruiting trail. You can sell that to the players in the locker room. And I think there's credibility there. Not to mention the fact that statistically the defense backed it up, right? His defense, the Cincinnati defense has been really good for a while with Tressell there, with Hitschler there. So you're also bringing in a track record of success. So those are the three coaches coming over. Coming up next, I want to talk a little bit about I want to talk a little bit about some of the other pieces that are coming with Fickell, including someone that's been called his secret weapon. We're going to talk about that next, as well as like some of the current coaches on the Badger staff. What do these coaches coming over mean for them? Have some of them already been replaced, I guess is what I'm saying. So we're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show is brought to you by our good friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline remains your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and information. It is the best spot to go to for all live in-game betting, futures betting. I'm not going to tell you again, but you should bet on the Niners to win the Super Bowl. I'm not going to tell you again, but take some money on the Suns to win the NBA championship, right? Get to those finals, like to win the NBA finals. Like that's where my money is, but I'm a fan. I bet with my heart, but I enjoy it. I use BetOnline to do that. Live in-game betting, live futures betting, a great spot to get all your sports coverage from baseball, basketball, soccer, golf, esports. It's all there. UFC. I really enjoy it. I think you will too. Do it responsibly. But it's a great way to have some fun, spice up your sports watching, and put your money where your heart is. Put your money where your mind is. Grab your mobile device, head to the website today. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's talk about. So we talked about three coaches, like on-field coaches coming over. Now let's talk about some of the behind-the-scenes things that we know are happening, including a guy that has been called Luke Fickell's secret weapon. And we've hit on it a little bit. We've talked about it a little bit, but let's dive a little bit more into Brady Collins. So Brady Collins is coming over. He's a strength and conditioning coach. He is considered Luke Fickell's maybe most trusted assistant, most trusted advisor, whatever you'd call kind of that position. But he is somebody that has gotten a lot of credit for developing, keyword there, developing physicality and the strength and explosiveness within the Cincinnati football program. And not all strength and conditioning coaches are created the same. Not all strength and conditioning programs are created the same, right? And it sure seems like he's cooking with something special down in Cincinnati, and that he's going to be bringing that to Madison. So if you go look at one of the best things you can do if you're looking at, because listen, we don't know these guys, right? We don't know these coaches. They're from Cincinnati. We haven't paid a bunch of our attention to them. This is the first time I've ever heard Brady Collins' name. It's not like I knew his name before all this stuff happened, right? So I'm not some expert here. So you go to the experts, you go to the people that cover that team, right? You go to the fans of that team, and you ask them who hurts the most. All these coaches coming over, who do you hate to see the most? And I'm telling you right now, Collins is like a 1A to or 1B to Luke Fickell. Okay, I talked to the Locked On Cincinnati guy, and he said, yeah, that's the dude right there. That's the dude that got our players that physical, that ready to go, that developed these 3-star players into NFL draft picks, because they've done that at Cincinnati now. And Collins, Brady Collins, the strength and conditioning coordinator, is a guy who really helped set that development culture there and really followed through on it. So bringing him over, listen, Jim Leonhard talked about it. Player development has slipped at Wisconsin, right? That's Jim Leonhard saying that. Who has better insight into that than the guy that's been within the program for years? I'm sure he was selling Chris McIntosh on that, saying, listen, this is slipped. I got to fix it too. Well, I think we fixed it with Brady Collins. Based on everything we've heard, based on everything we've read, based on what people at Cincinnati are saying, I think we fixed the strength and conditioning program. Now, nothing happens overnight, right? Nothing changes immediately. He's going to have to come in. He's going to have to figure out kind of what he's working with here. No two places are the same. He's going to have different players to work with, but it sure sounds like this is a home run addition, and really one of the ones Cincinnati Bearcats fans were the saddest to see. So, yeah, also a great social media follow, by the way. He gets you hyped. If you go look up some of his videos on YouTube, I put one of them on Twitter. You can tell why he's a strength and conditioning coach, because he gets after them. I love it. And then we got 2 more coming over in the recruiting department, Pat Lambert and Max Steinecker. So Lambert is the director of the recruiting, and then they also have a director of recruiting strategy, which is Max Steinecker. And both of these gentlemen, if you go look them up, they're considered recruiting aces. Okay, one of the social media sites that follows recruiting said both of these guys are just tremendous recruiters, that they're going to outwork everybody. Players are going to love them. Parents are going to love them. And really, when you listen to what people say about them, you really get a feel that they are intentionally where they are for a reason, right? Steinecker and Lambert are recruiting directors and recruiting people for a reason, because they're really dang good at it. And if you contrast that to what Wisconsin has had, like Mickey Turner was put in the recruiting department because, I don't really know, right? Paul Chris didn't fill that recruiting department for like a year. He had an interim guy, Eric Johnson, in there who really had no business being in there. It's just such a culture change. It's such a shift, right? And it's quite frankly really refreshing. And I'm not trying to, again, dance on anybody's grave, but it's the intentionality of having people in your recruiting department that are legit recruiting people and are really dang good at it. I think it matters, and you can tell that Cincinnati put that intentionality there, whereas Wisconsin really hasn't. And bringing those 2 dudes in, it's a continuation of what we talked about, right? Development and recruiting are being re-emphasized in Madison. And I think that's a huge deal. And it's one of the things I'm most excited about. Let's see what we can do with a real recruiting department. One that was put together with the purpose of not just finding a spot for Mickey Turner, because he's a really good coach and a Wisconsin guy, but it was put together with the purpose of, these are the best recruiting guys I can find. I'm speaking as Luke Fickell at this point, and I'm going to put them in these spots and they're going to crush it. And they had the 27, up until this Luke Fickell move, they had the 27th ranked class in the country this year. A 4-star quarterback, high 3-star, 4-star quarterback, 4-star outside linebacker. This is a group that has proven they can recruit, identify, and develop. Between these 2 gentlemen and Brady Collins, I'm incredibly excited to see how this plays out. So, all right, let's keep going. Those are really the names we have right now, by the way. So we have the 3 coaches I talked about. I think you can check the box at receiver. I think you can check the box at safeties, and you can probably check the box at defensive coordinator. And then you have 2 recruiting guys coming over, both that have generated a lot of success on the recruiting trail, and you have a strength and conditioning coach that just sounds like a total dude, right? Like the total package to fit that role. So I think with these 6 people coming over, overall, you got to be really excited as a Badger fan. There's nobody here that when you read the resume, you're like, gosh, I don't know. That feels kind of light. There's nobody here that when you look at the accolades or you look at what people say about them, you're like, well, maybe he should be at like a MAC level. These all feel like legit dudes. Time will tell. We don't know for sure. There's no promises, but I'm excited for it. Now I want to talk about the part that kind of stinks. What does this mean for the coaches on staff right now? I've said this before, but I want to say it one more time. I don't root for anybody's lives to get upended. That doesn't make me happy or excited. I don't root for anybody to even lose a job. We do have to talk. If I'm going to cover the Badgers, I do have to talk about staff changes. I have to talk about being excited for a new coach coming in because I believe in them. But it's not lost on me that coaches. Here's the thing. I hear. Let me rephrase this even a little bit. I hear a lot of sentiment. Well, Coach X made $800,000, and this is the profession. Sure, his kid's in high school, right? His kid's not making $800,000, right? His wife may have just relocated for this year or a year ago, and now he may have to move again. Like that. These people have families, right? And they have dreams and aspirations, and for a person maybe getting a chance to be a Division I coach or a chance in the Big Ten, losing your job quickly may set all that back. So I want to be empathetic with that. I want to be very clear that I'm not rooting for none of this makes me happy to seeing coaches get fired or let go. Okay, I guess that's what I want to say. But we also have to talk about new coaches coming in, and some of them I think are going to be upgrades, and that's just the nature of the business. So I did want to say that. So now what does this mean for the current staff? With the new coaches coming in, I think Alvis Whitted's gone, right? And he was one of the guys that I was really hoping we could keep because I think he's done a good job of recruiting. And I like the development of some of the young players, but I mean, Fickell's bringing a receiver coach with him. That's it, right? I think that's the writing on the wall for Alvis. Let's talk about Bobby April. What does this mean for Bobby April? Right. There's an obvious guy I'm going to talk about in a second, but let's get to Bobby April. What does this mean for Bobby April? So you're bringing in 2 defensive coaches that are co-defensive coordinators. One of them is also a linebackers coach. Now, what could happen? Let's say Tressell's coming in to be the defensive coordinator, and maybe he coaches inside linebackers, right? Which means maybe you can keep Bobby April where he's at. Bobby April has been a great recruiter for Wisconsin. I would love for him to stay on the staff because I think he gets after it on the recruiting trail. I know he gets after it on the recruiting trail. I've talked to Tackett Curtis's coach. I talked to the walk-on he committed last year out of Washington. Like Bobby April is a tremendous recruiter. And maybe you work something like they've done this year where you have separate coaches for inside and outside linebackers. Again, it depends on what scheme Tressell wants to run, what scheme Luke Fickell wants to run. Potentially Bobby April stays on, but I think that's a big question mark now that you've brought in 2 guys who are co-defensive coordinators, one of which is a linebackers coach. Let's talk Mickey Turner, right? Mickey Turner is a recruiting coordinator right now. They just brought in 2 recruiting guys, 2 high-level recruiting guys. So where does Mickey Turner slot into this? Now, what I find really interesting, what we don't have answers for, is how are they going to build out the rest of this recruiting department? Is it possible Mickey Turner could stay on the recruiting staff in some role? It would be a lesser role, probably lesser pay. It would be probably looked at as a demotion, but maybe he could still stay on in that type of role. I would think Luke Fickell is going to want to keep some recruiting connections to the state of Wisconsin, to the program. Turner could be that guy. It's also possible Turner moves back to tight ends, right? I thought he was a good tight ends coach. I thought he recruited well at that spot. So that's an interesting one to me. Could he potentially move back to tight ends under Luke Fickell? I haven't seen Luke Fickell really aligned with any other tight end coach. I haven't seen the smoke there. So maybe that's the vision. He moves out of the recruiting department, stays at tight ends, and then Luke Fickell kind of builds out his own recruiting department. It's possible, right? So in terms of the rest of the group, I think with a new coach coming in, Bobby Ingram is certainly gone. I don't think there's any chance there, especially given the struggles of the offense last year. I think Chris Herring is certainly gone. I think Al Johnson's gone. I think basically the entire offensive staff, because we've talked about Alvis Whitted being gone as well, outside of Bosted, who I'm not sure on. I think the rest of the offensive staff is gone. On the defensive side, it gets interesting. I'm gonna talk about Jim Leonhard in the next segment, but you have Ross Kalaji, who we haven't heard anything in terms of who Fickell might be bringing in as a defensive line coach. I think Kalaji's done pretty well. I wouldn't be opposed to him staying. You have D'Onofrio at inside linebackers coach. I think he's gone. April, I would love to stay, but we'll have to see. So that's kind of where I see where we're at right now with the amount of fidelity we have. All right, let's get into Jim Leonhard next because I have several thoughts on this one. But first, I do want to take a quick break, or a quick second for a break for our friends. All right, welcome back to Locked On Badgers, everybody. Really do appreciate it. If you like the show, hit the subscribe button. It's really a great way to support us, to keep us going, keep us growing. I love it. Let's talk Jim Leonhard. So this one's tough for me because Jim Leonhard, I just know in the week heading up to this that he probably he thought he was getting the job right, and then to not get it, like, I don't think it was owed to him, and I don't necessarily think he was done dirty, but I also could put myself in his shoes and his family's shoes of being so excited for this opportunity, and then at the last moment kind of getting yanked out from your feet. And he's not a typical coach, y'all, right? He's so rooted in Wisconsin and in Madison. His kids are there, his family's there. Like, it means so much to him. It's not going to be as easy for him just to say, oh, I'll go get the other job. I'll go get the next best opportunity. Like, he's made comments about not wanting to uproot his family, all right, about wanting to stay here and create that time for them. So I think people need to realize, you don't have to realize it, but have empathy for it, because he's going to get his choice of jobs, right? At a certain level, he's going to be able to basically cherry pick a defensive coordinator job if he wants, probably jump to the NFL if he wants, probably get a mid-tier head coaching job if he wants. But it's never been that simple for him, right? Because his family's involved and he's just so rooted in Wisconsin and in Madison. So what this means for Jim Leonhard is he's not coming back, right? I'll just go ahead and say that. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope something can be worked out. But if Luke Fickell is bringing over two guys who are co-defensive coordinators, by the way, one of those guys is also a safeties coach, where does it doesn't leave anywhere for Jim Leonhard to naturally slide into, right? You can't ask a dude like that to, well, what about, could you coach cornerbacks? That's kind of a slap in the face. He's too good for that. And I feel like you wouldn't even want to ask him to do it. Like, I just don't see a spot where he could naturally fit. And quite frankly, if he came back, here's the thing, if he came back as a defensive coordinator, he was the defensive coordinator, I think the locker room would be fine. First of all, Jim Leonhard would never do anything, in my opinion. He's not the guy who would undermine another coach because he didn't get the job. That's not his character. So I think the locker room would be totally fine. I think the players would get over it. You can't have the players buy into it, having a guy who they thought was the head coach, and then now he's a positional coach. Like, he doesn't even keep the defensive coordinator spot. I don't think the players would jive with that. I think it would hurt the locker room. So I hate to say it. I think that's it. I think I was holding out hope until we saw that Luke Fickell was bringing his defensive coordinators with him. And then I think at that point, it's not going to work. Now, where could Jim Leonhard go? I've heard Michigan. I mean, Michigan. So Cincinnati, there's a little bit of smoke connecting Cincinnati and Michigan's defensive coordinator. So if that move happens, you darn right you could see Jim Harbaugh reaching out to Jim Leonhard, right? And that would be a great hire for Michigan and be a great move for Jim. Maybe I saw someone say, what about the Cincinnati head coaching job? I think they're going to look for somebody with experience or somebody with more ties for the program. There's a possibility Illinois' defensive coordinator leaves after the job he did this year. I don't know if he would really want to work for Bielema or not. I don't know. It'd be interesting. There's also the possibility he can just wait a year, right? He could wait a year and then really align himself to finding the best opportunity. So I don't know what will happen. I don't pretend to know. I do feel really bad for him and his family, just in terms of your plans kind of got uprooted. Again, I never root for that. And that's with all the people on the staff. So, I feel for that, but I don't see any scenario where he comes back. If this is going like we assume it is, with Tressell coming in as the defensive coordinator, and you're bringing in another guy who's the co-defensive coordinator and is also a safeties coach. That's the key. Also a safeties coach. Yeah, I think the book is written on that. Which honestly, maybe it is. Maybe that is for the best anyway. Like, I think we all kind of got pie in the eye with what if you can get them both. That would be tough for some of the defensive guys to really want Jim Leonhard in the head coaching job and now see him relegated to like a positional coach. So maybe it's for the best anyway. And we're going to wrap up there. Actually, no, let's take one of these comments. I was going to wrap up there, but I got a couple comments. Kevin Willis said, look how quickly Lincoln Riley turned things around at USC. Yeah, agreed. I mean, now he got the quarterback, right? That's the key. So he went to USC and got the quarterback. So if Luke Fickell can come in and get the quarterback fixed, he can turn around really quick. Absolutely. Kevin, thank you for the comment. David P says Nebraska fans seem to be convincing themselves their athletic director wanted Rule over Fickell because they've got the better job. No way would Fickell turn them down. David, thank you for the comments. Fickell wasn't going there. Like Luke Fickell could have gone a lot of places. It's telling he chose Wisconsin. Now, here's what I'd say. Like, I think multiple things can be true. I think Matt Rule's a really good hire. I do. I'm not one of those guys who cares a whole lot about what he did in the NFL. Now, he has to prove he can win big games. He didn't do that at Baylor, but he turned Temple around. He did really well at Baylor. Dave Aranda won with a lot of his players. I think he recruits well. He understands line play. He's a Midwestern guy. He checks a lot of boxes. So I think it's a good hire. No sane person is taking him over Luke Fickell, in my opinion, if they have the choice. So we've been talking Clemson comparisons. Maybe Fickell can come in and be Dabo Swinney light. Tim Highsmith says the one issue I have with the Clemson comparison is they had two generational quarterback talents. Can Wisconsin bring in that type of talent? Yeah, Tim, that's it, right? And it's the same thing I said with Kevin Willis' comments about switching USC around with Lincoln Riley. You got to get the quarterback right, and Luke Fickell's going to have to fix that. He's going to have to figure it out. And if he can do that, yeah, the ceiling's going to be pretty high. But by the way, people talk about you got to get the quarterback talent. Well, let's just make this simple point of quarterback talent is attracted to the right head coaches, right? You're not getting the quarterbacks if you can't get the right hires at the top of your program done. So I think the Badgers, they got the right guy at head coach, and that's going to make it easier to bring in the quarterbacking talent. So we'll see where it goes, but I think they got half the equation done. And then last one here. This is something I wanted to throw up here. Craig Hendricks said, looking at Luke Fickell, the way he comes across, you get a whole different feeling. I haven't had that for a while in Wisconsin football. The thing with going from Paul Chryst to Luke Fickell, Paul Chryst, just in terms of how he talked, how he conducted press conferences, how he sold the program, what his vision was, it was so hard to buy into that confidence when the program was starting to stumble that anybody you get in that speaks with some vision and clarity and purpose, it just feels different. And again, we'll have to see how it works, right? There's no promises here, but it does have a different feel to it, Craig. I agree. All right, everybody. I want to thank you for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. We're going to talk to you again tomorrow. I think we got John Garcia Jr. coming on tomorrow. We're going to talk Luke Fickell recruiting, big picture stuff. Anybody we're looking to flip, that's going to be a fun show. And on Friday, I got a special guest for y'all. Saturday, we got Marquette. So we're going to keep pumping out the content. Appreciate y'all so much. Thank you for tuning in. Well, yeah, I think that's it. On Wisconsin. Let's go.